Hey everyone, I'm Peter Stories, here to guide you today. If you use this video to drift off to sleep, please tap like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, settle in, get cozy, and let yourself relax. My name is Ethan Parker and I am 29 years old. I've been a park ranger at Great Smoky Mountains National Park for 8 years. This happened during the fall of 2023, when the missing person case of Rebecca Hall turned into something that still haunts me. The first sign that something was wrong came at 4:17 a.m. on October 13th, when my radio crackled with static so violent it sounded like screaming. I was stationed at the Cataract Falls Ranger Station, doing overnight monitoring during peak fall tourist season, when dispatch finally broke through the interference. Ranger Parker, we have a code yellow at Cades Cove. Multiple missing persons, family of 4 plus their guide. Last known location was the Blackwood Ridge Trail System. I sat up in my chair, instantly alert. Blackwood Ridge was off limits to tourists, had been for the past 3 years after a series of unexplained accidents. The trail markers had been removed, the access roads blocked, and every park map clearly marked it as a restricted area. Copy that, dispatch. Who authorized access to Blackwood Ridge? Static filled the channel for several seconds before the response came through, distorted and barely intelligible. No. Authorization. On file. Family. Reported. Overdue. 12 hours. I grabbed my emergency kit and headed for my truck. A family of 4 with a guide missing for 12 hours in restricted territory was bad enough. But what made my blood run cold was the date. October 13th. The same date that old Martha Blackwood had been found dead in her cabin up on the ridge, exactly 50 years ago. The locals had always whispered about Martha. They said she'd been practicing the old ways up in those hills for decades. That she knew secrets about the forest that went back to the Cherokee, who'd lived there before the white settlers came. When they found her body, it had been arranged in a ritualistic pattern, surrounded by symbols carved into the cabin floor and strange bundles of herbs and bones hanging from the rafters. The official report listed her death as natural causes, heart failure brought on by extreme isolation and malnutrition. But the local Cherokee elders I'd spoken with over the years told a different story. They said Martha had been trying to bind something to the mountain, something that had been sleeping in the deep places for centuries. They said she'd succeeded, but the binding had cost her life. I'd always dismissed it as folklore, the kind of story that grows up around any isolated death in the wilderness. But as I drove toward Cades Cove in the pre-dawn darkness, I found myself thinking about the accidents that had led to the area being closed. 3 separate incidents in as many months. A rock climber who'd fallen from a cliff that surveillance footage showed him climbing away from, not toward. A family of hikers found catatonic, claiming they'd been chased by the old woman in the woods. And a photographer who'd been discovered hanging from a tree, his camera missing and strange symbols carved into his skin. The Cherokee elders had nodded knowingly when I'd asked them about the accidents. Martha's been dead 50 years, one of them had told me. But what she bound to that mountain ain't dead, it's hungry. I reached the Cades Cove parking area just as the sun began to rise through the October mist. The missing family's minivan sat alone in the lot, its windows fogged with condensation. Inside, I could see backpacks and water bottles, a child's stuffed animal, and a folded map with a route marked in red ink, a route that led straight up to Blackwood Ridge. The family was the Johnsons from Atlanta, David and Patricia, their twin daughters Sarah and Emma, both age 8, and their guide, a local man named Marcus Chen who'd been leading wilderness tours in the area for over a decade. According to the report, they'd started their hike at 2 p.m. the previous day, planning to return before dark. I radioed my partner, Jennifer Martinez, who was stationed at the Elkmont entrance. Jennifer, you copy the code yellow? Copy, Ethan. I'm about 20 minutes out. You want me to bring the search dogs? Negative. Dogs won't track properly up on Blackwood Ridge. Too many conflicting scents. Too much old growth interfering with the trails. We'll do this one on foot. What I didn't tell Jennifer was that I'd tried to use dogs on the ridge before, during the photographer incident. The animals had refused to enter the restricted area. whining and backing away from the trailhead, as if they could sense something wrong. When I'd finally forced Rex, my usual tracking partner, to follow me onto the ridge, he'd lasted less than 10 minutes before turning and running back down the mountain, his tail between his legs and his eyes wide with terror. I shouldered my pack and headed for the blocked trail access. The Forest Service had installed a steel gate across the main path, but it was standing open, its padlock cut cleanly through. Someone had wanted to get onto that ridge badly enough to destroy federal property. The Blackwood Ridge trail system was a remnant from the early days of the park, before modern safety regulations and environmental protection protocols. The paths were narrow and poorly maintained, winding through dense rhododendron thickets and around granite outcroppings that blocked out most of the sunlight. During the Cherokee era, this area had been considered sacred ground, a place where the living world touched the spirit realm. I'd been hiking for about 30 minutes when I found the first sign of the missing family. A child's hair ribbon, bright pink against the dark forest floor, caught on a thorny branch about 20 feet off the main trail. I bagged it and marked the GPS coordinates, then noticed something that made my skin crawl. Footprints, multiple sets, including small ones that would belong to the children. But these weren't the chaotic, wandering prints of people who'd gotten lost. They were perfectly spaced, deliberate, following a path that led deeper into the restricted area. It was as if the entire family had simply decided to walk off the marked trail and into the wilderness with complete confidence in their destination. I followed the prints for another quarter-mile, pushing through undergrowth that should have been impassable for children. The tracks led to a small clearing dominated by a massive oak tree, its trunk twisted and gnarled with age. At the base of the tree, I found Marcus Chen's backpack, sitting upright and perfectly positioned. Inside the pack, everything was exactly as it should be. First aid supplies, emergency flares, GPS device, and trail maps. But there was something else, something that made my hands shake as I examined it. A leather-bound journal, written in Marcus's handwriting, documenting what appeared to be multiple trips to Blackwood Ridge over the past several months. The entries were increasingly erratic, describing dreams and visions that had led him to the restricted area. He wrote about hearing voices calling him from the mountain, about seeing an old woman in the woods who spoke to him in Cherokee and promised to show him the true paths. The final entry was dated the day before the family's disappearance. She's ready for them. The binding is weakening, and she needs fresh offerings to renew it. The children will be perfect. Their innocence will give her power, and their parents' fear will feed the hunger. I know what I have to do. I know what I've always been meant to do. I radioed Jennifer immediately. Jennifer, I need you to contact the FBI field office in Knoxville. We've got a potential kidnapping situation here, possibly with occult elements. I'm going to continue tracking, but I need backup ASAP. Ethan, you're breaking up. Say again? I looked at my radio and saw that the display was showing no signal, despite being in an area that should have had full coverage. I tried again, but got only static. Even my emergency beacon was showing offline. That's when I heard it. A voice, singing in a language I didn't recognize but somehow understood. It was coming from deeper in the forest, beyond the massive oak tree, and it was getting closer. I drew my weapon and moved toward the sound, following a path that hadn't been there moments before. The singing grew louder, more distinct, and I realized it wasn't in Cherokee or any other native language I'd heard. It was older, much older, like something from the very beginning of the world. The path led to another clearing, this one surrounding the ruins of an old cabin. I recognized it immediately from the crime scene photos I'd seen years ago. Martha Blackwood's homestead, where she'd been found dead 50 years earlier. But the cabin wasn't the ruin it should have been. The roof was intact, smoke was rising from the chimney, and warm light flickered in the windows. And there, standing in the doorway, was Martha Blackwood herself. She looked exactly as she had in the old photographs, but wrong somehow. Her skin had a waxy, translucent quality, and her eyes were completely black. She was wearing a simple dress that might have been white once but was now stained with things I didn't want to identify. In her hands, she held a bundle of what looked like herbs and small bones. "Ranger Parker," she said, her voice carrying impossibly well across the clearing. "I've been waiting for you. The mountain told me you'd come." "Where are the Johnsons?" I demanded, keeping my weapon trained on her. "Where are the children?" She smiled, revealing teeth that were stained black and filed to points. "They're safe. They're exactly where they need to be, where they've always been meant to be. You're Martha Blackwood. You died 50 years ago. Death is just another binding, Ranger Parker, and I've always been very good with bindings." She gestured toward the cabin, and I saw that the walls were covered with symbols similar to those I'd seen in the old crime scene photos. "The mountain has been hungry for so long. It needs to feed to grow strong again." The Cherokee understood this. They knew that some hungers must be satisfied. "What did you do with the family?" "I gave them purpose. I gave them meaning. They're part of something greater now, something that's been sleeping in these hills since before your people came with their roads and their rules and their ignorance." As she spoke, I became aware of other figures moving in the shadows around the cabin. The Johnson family emerged from the darkness, but they were wrong, changed. Their skin had the same waxy quality as Martha's, and their eyes were empty, black pits. The children held hands, moving in perfect synchronization, their small faces serene and emotionless. "You see?" Martha said, her voice full of maternal pride. "They understand now. They understand what they are, what they've always been. Offerings to the mountain, food for the hunger that sleeps in the deep places." Marcus Chen stepped out of the cabin, and I saw that he was no longer quite human. His features had become fluid, shifting as if he were forgetting how to maintain his original form. When he spoke, his voice was a harmony of whispers. "She showed me the truth, Ethan. The mountain is alive, and it's been starving. All those years of leading tourists through the wilderness, I was just gathering food for it. But I didn't understand until Martha taught me. 'This is insane,' I said, though I could feel my conviction wavering. 'You're all sick or drugged or awakened,' Martha interrupted. 'The mountain has been calling to you for years, Ranger Parker. Every missing person case, every unexplained disappearance, you felt it then, didn't you? The pull of the deep places.' She was right. I had felt it. Every time I'd ventured into the restricted areas, every time I'd investigated reports of strange sightings or unexplained phenomena, there had been a part of me that wanted to keep going, to see what lay beyond the mapped trails and official boundaries. The mountain chose you long ago," Martha continued, stepping closer. "It's been patient, letting you play your role, letting you bring it offerings. But now it's time for you to stop pretending to be separate from it." I tried to back away, but the clearing seemed to stretch as I moved, always keeping Martha at the same distance. The Johnson family began to circle me, their movements perfectly coordinated, their black eyes fixed on mine. "What do you want from me?" I whispered. "Join us," they said in unison, their voices creating harmonies that human voices shouldn't be able to produce. "Feed the mountain. Help it grow. Help it wake. And if I refuse?" Martha's smile widened, revealing more of those sharpened teeth. "You can't refuse, Ranger Parker. You're already here. You're already part of it. The only choice is whether you fight it or embrace it." I felt something warm trickling down my face and realized that symbols were carving themselves into my forehead, burning with cold fire. The world around me began to shift and change, revealing the mountain as it truly was. Not a collection of trees and rocks, but a living entity, ancient and hungry and utterly alien. "You understand now," Martha said, her voice full of compassion that made everything worse. "You understand what we are, what we've become. You understand what you're going to become." The Johnson family reached for me with hands that were no longer quite human, their fingers extending into claws, their faces melting and reforming into new configurations. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. And then suddenly I was back at the Cades Cove parking area. I was sitting in my truck, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my radio crackling with normal traffic. It was 6:30 a.m., and the morning sun was burning off the overnight mist. I looked around frantically. The Johnson family's minivan was still there, exactly where I'd seen it earlier. But when I checked the missing persons report, It showed that they'd only been reported overdue 2 hours ago, not 12. I grabbed my radio with shaking hands. "Dispatch, this is Ranger Parker. I need to report a missing family at Cades Cove. The Johnsons, David and Patricia, twin daughters Sarah and Emma, plus their guide Marcus Chen." "Copy that, Ranger Parker. This is the first report we've received. Are you requesting a search team?" "Affirmative, full search and rescue. And I need you to contact the FBI field office in Knoxville. We may have a situation involving the restricted area on Blackwood Ridge." "Negative on the FBI contact, Ranger Parker. Blackwood Ridge has been permanently sealed by order of the Department of Interior. No one has had access to that area for over 3 years." I looked at myself in the rearview mirror and saw that my forehead was unmarked. There were no symbols, no blood, no sign of what I'd experienced. But I could still feel them, burned into my skin like invisible brands. The search team arrived an hour later, led by Jennifer Martinez. We conducted the search by the book following standard protocols for missing persons in wilderness areas. We found the Johnson family's trail easily enough. They'd followed the marked path for about 2 miles before turning off onto what appeared to be an old deer trail. We found them at noon, sitting in a circle around a small campfire, staring at the flames with vacant expressions. They claimed they'd only been gone for a few hours, despite being missing for over 8 hours. They had no memory of leaving the marked trail, no recollection of spending the night in the wilderness. Marcus Chen was with them, but he was different. His eyes held a depth that hadn't been there before, and when he looked at me, I saw recognition, and something else. Something that made my blood run cold. "Ethan," he said quietly as the medical team checked the family for hypothermia. "Did you dream about her too? About the old woman in the woods?" I didn't answer, but I saw him nod as if I had. "She's still there," he whispered. "She's still waiting. And she's not done with us yet." The Johnson family was cleared as physically unharmed, but recommended for psychological evaluation due to the memory loss. They returned to Atlanta the next day, but I noticed that they kept looking back at the mountains as they drove away, as if they were leaving something important behind. Marcus Chen disappeared 3 days later. His truck was found at the Cades Cove parking area, but there was no sign of him. The official search lasted a week, but I knew we wouldn't find him. He'd gone back to Blackwood Ridge, back to Martha and the thing that lived in the mountain. 2 weeks after that, David Johnson called the Park Service. His family had been having dreams, he said. Dreams about an old woman who sang to them in languages they didn't understand. Dreams about a mountain that was hungry and needed to be fed. He wanted to bring his family back to the park, to find the old woman, and ask her what she wanted. I advised him against it, but I could hear in his voice that he'd already made up his mind. The Johnson family returned to the Great Smoky Mountains the following weekend. They never checked in with the Park Service, never filed a hiking plan, never contacted anyone. They were simply there one day and gone the next, as if they'd never existed at all. But I know they're still there, somewhere up on Blackwood Ridge, in the place that doesn't appear on any map. They're with Martha and Marcus and all the others who've been drawn to that mountain over the decades. They're feeding the hunger that sleeps in the deep places, keeping it satisfied so it doesn't wake completely. And I know that someday, probably soon, I'll join them. Because the dreams have started for me too. Dreams of an old woman who sings in languages older than human speech, who knows secrets about the forest that go back to the beginning of time. Dreams of a mountain that's alive and hungry and calling my name. The symbols are burning on my forehead again, even though I can't see them. And I can hear Martha's voice, carried on the wind that blows down from Blackwood Ridge. "Come home, Ranger Parker. Come home to the mountain that chose you. Come home to the hunger that must be fed." I've put in for a transfer, but somehow the paperwork keeps getting lost. I've requested early retirement, but the forms never make it to the right office. I've tried to quit outright, but I keep showing up for work, keep patrolling the trails, keep searching for missing persons, because that's what I do. That's what I've always done. I search for people who are lost, and I bring them back to where they belong. And Martha Blackwood is patient. She's been patient for 50 years, and she can wait a little longer. She knows that eventually, I'll stop fighting the dreams. Eventually, I'll walk up that mountain one last time and I'll take my place in the circle around her cabin. The mountain is hungry, and it's been waiting for me to come home. I can hear it calling my name. My name is David Jones, and I'm 38 years old. I've been a park ranger at Great Smoky Mountains National Park for 12 years. This happened during the fall of 2023, when the missing person case of Amanda Richardson turned into something that still haunts me. The radio crackled to life at 4:47 p.m., just as the autumn sun was beginning its descent behind the mountains. October in the Smokies meant early darkness, and I knew we had maybe 2 hours of decent light left before the forest became a maze of shadows and whispers. Ranger Jones, we have a missing person report. 23-year-old female, Amanda Richardson, last seen on the Chimney Tops Trail around noon. Family's getting worried. The dispatcher's voice carried that edge it always did when someone went missing this close to nightfall. I grabbed my radio, already reaching for my gear. Copy that, Control. Any description of what she was wearing? Red hiking jacket, black pants, gray backpack. She was supposed to meet friends at the parking area by 3 p.m. Never showed. Amanda Richardson. The name felt familiar, but I couldn't place it. After 12 years of missing hikers, the names sometimes blurred together. Most of them turned out fine, lost track of time, took a wrong turn, sat down to rest and fell asleep. But something about this one felt different. Maybe it was the way the wind had been acting all day, carrying sounds that shouldn't be there, or the way my dog Rex had been whining and pacing since morning. Rex, my German Shepherd search and rescue partner, was already at the door of the ranger station, his ears perked and body tense. He'd been with me for 8 years, and I'd learned to trust his instincts. If Rex was nervous, there was usually a good reason. "All right, boy," I said, clipping his search harness on. "Let's go find this girl." The Chimney Tops Trail was one of our most popular, but also one of the most treacherous as daylight faded. The path wound through dense forest before climbing rocky terrain that could be deadly in the dark. I'd pulled 3 bodies off those rocks over the years, hikers who'd gotten disoriented and fallen. We reached the trailhead parking area just as the last tour buses were pulling away. The summer crowds were gone, replaced by the smaller but more dedicated fall hikers who came for the changing leaves. The lot was nearly empty except for a red Honda Civic, Amanda's car, according to the plates. I approached the vehicle, noting the doors were locked and nothing seemed disturbed. Through the windows, I could see a purse on the passenger seat and a phone charger plugged into the dashboard. Rex circled the car, nose to the ground, then looked up at me with what I'd learned to recognize as his "something's wrong" expression. "What is it, boy?" He led me to the driver's side door and sat, his signal that he'd found the scent trail. But instead of heading toward the main trail, he turned toward the parking area's edge, where the forest grew thick and dark. I keyed my radio. "Control, this is Jones. I'm at the Chimney Tops parking area with Amanda Richardson's vehicle. My dog's picking up a scent trail, but it's not heading toward the main trail. It's going into the backcountry." "Copy that, Jones. You want backup?" I looked at the darkening sky. Standard protocol said yes, but backup was 20 minutes away, and we were losing light fast. "Negative, Control. Rex and I will track for an hour, see what we find. If we don't locate her by full dark, we'll set up a staging area for a full search tomorrow." "Roger. Stay in radio contact." Rex was already pulling toward the tree line, his nose working overtime. I followed him into the forest, my headlamp cutting through the gathering gloom. The autumn air was sharp and clean, filled with the scent of dying leaves and the distant promise of the first frost. We'd been tracking for maybe 20 minutes when Rex suddenly stopped. His hackles rose and a low growl rumbled in his chest. In all our years together, I'd never heard him make that sound. "What is it, Rex?" He was staring at something ahead, his body rigid. I followed his gaze and saw it. A piece of red fabric caught on a branch about 30 yards ahead, Amanda's jacket. But that wasn't what made my blood run cold. It was the way the fabric was positioned, too high up on the branch as if it had been placed there deliberately. And below it, scratched into the bark of the tree, were 3 words that made my stomach drop. She screamed beautifully. I keyed my radio with shaking hands. Control, this is Jones. I need backup immediately. We may have more than a missing person situation here. Say again, Jones. I'm looking at what appears to be evidence of foul play. Request immediate backup and notify the county sheriff's department. Copy that. Units are en route. I photographed the scene with my phone, careful not to disturb anything. Rex was still growling, his attention focused deeper into the forest. That's when I heard it, a sound that shouldn't exist in nature. Whistling. Someone was whistling a tune, high and sweet, drifting through the trees like smoke. The melody was familiar, something I'd heard before but couldn't place. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, echoing off the trees in a way that made it impossible to determine the source. Rex whined and pressed against my leg. Smart dog. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get out of there, to wait for backup, to follow protocol. But somewhere in those dark woods was Amanda Richardson, and if she was still alive, every minute counted. I unholstered my sidearm and started forward, Rex reluctantly following. The whistling continued, always seeming to stay just ahead of us, leading us deeper into the forest. The terrain grew rougher, and I had to use my hands to climb over fallen logs and navigate around massive boulders. That's when I found the second piece of evidence. Amanda's gray backpack was sitting upright against a tree, perfectly positioned as if someone had carefully placed it there. But the backpack was wrong. The fabric was shredded, with what looked like claw marks, though no animal I knew made tears that precise. Inside the pack, I found Amanda's wallet, her phone, and a small notebook. The phone was dead, but the notebook was filled with her handwriting. Most of it was typical hiker stuff, trail notes, weather observations, sketches of wildflowers. But the last entry, dated today, made my hands shake. Something's been following me since I left the main trail. I keep hearing whistling, but every time I turn around, there's nothing there. I'm scared. If something happens to me, tell my family I love them. There's a man in the woods and he's been watching me. He knows my name. Below that, in different handwriting, masculine, sharp, was a message that made my blood freeze. Hello, Ranger Jones. I've been waiting for you. The whistling stopped. The forest fell silent in a way that wasn't natural. No bird calls, no rustling leaves, no insect sounds. Even the wind seemed to have died away. In that silence, I could hear my own heartbeat, Rex's panting, and something else. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, circling us. Amanda, I called out, my voice echoing through the trees. Amanda Richardson, if you can hear me, call out. The response came from directly behind me, so close I could feel breath on my neck. She can't answer you, Ranger Jones. She's busy screaming. I spun around, gun raised, but there was nothing there. Rex was barking now, turning in circles, trying to track whatever was moving around us. The footsteps continued, always just out of sight, always circling. Who are you? I shouted. Where's Amanda? Laughter drifted through the trees, high and musical, like the sound of breaking glass. Oh, Ranger Jones, you know who I am. You've been hunting me for 3 years now. Sarah Chen, remember her? Pretty little thing, loved to hike alone. And Jennifer Walsh, she put up such a fight. And Marcus Thompson, though he wasn't as fun as the girls. My blood turned to ice. Those were the names from the unsolved cases, the hikers who disappeared over the past 3 years. We'd found Jennifer's body, but the others. You're him, I whispered. The Whispering Woods killer. Give the ranger a prize. The voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. Though I prefer to think of myself as an artist. Each one is a masterpiece, Ranger Jones. Amanda is going to be my best work yet. A scream cut through the forest, high and terrified, coming from somewhere ahead. Amanda. She was still alive. I ran toward the sound, Rex beside me, crashing through underbrush and leaping over fallen logs. The scream came again, closer now, and I could hear sobbing, pleading. Please, I don't want to die. Someone help me. Keep calling, Amanda, I shouted. I'm coming. The forest opened into a small clearing, and what I saw there will haunt me for the rest of my life. Amanda Richardson was tied to a tree in the center of the clearing, her red jacket torn and bloody. But she wasn't alone. 3 other figures sat around her in a circle, propped against trees like dolls. Even in the dim light, I could see they were badly decomposed, their faces twisted in expressions of terror. Sarah Chen, Jennifer Walsh, Marcus Thompson. The killer had kept them all, arranged them like an audience for his latest performance. "Welcome to the show, Ranger Jones." The voice came from above, and I looked up to see a figure perched in the branches of a massive oak tree. In the dancing light of my headlamp, I could make out a tall, thin man with wild hair and eyes that reflected light like an animal's. "You're just in time for the finale," he called down. "Amanda's been asking for you." He dropped from the tree with impossible grace, landing in a crouch 20 feet away. In the light, I could see him clearly for the first time. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with the lean build of someone who spent a lot of time in the wilderness. His clothes were military surplus, all black, and his face was painted with intricate patterns that looked like tribal war paint. "Thomas Kane," he said, straightening up with a theatrical bow. "Though most people just call me the Whispering Woods Killer. I've been expecting you, Ranger Jones. We have so much to discuss." I kept my gun trained on him, but something was wrong. Rex wasn't barking anymore. He was lying on his side, breathing but unconscious. "What did you do to my dog?" "Just a little something I picked up in Afghanistan. Don't worry, he'll be fine. I need him alive for what comes next." Kane began to circle me, staying just out of range, his movements fluid and predatory. "You know, Ranger Jones, I've been studying you for 3 years. Every search, every rescue, every time you failed to find me. You're good at your job, but you're not good enough." "Let Amanda go," I said, keeping my voice steady. "This is between you and me." "Oh, but it's not just between us anymore." Kane's smile was razor sharp. "You see, I've been planning this moment for a very long time. You're not just going to witness my masterpiece, you're going to be part of it." He pulled something from his pocket, a small device that looked like a remote control. "Do you know what this is, Ranger Jones? It's a signal jammer. Your radio hasn't been working for the past 20 minutes. Nobody knows where you are. Nobody's coming to help you." I pressed the transmit button on my radio. Static. "Your backup is sitting in a parking lot 15 miles away waiting for you to check in. By the time they realize something's wrong, you'll be just another missing person case." Amanda was watching me with desperate eyes, tears streaming down her face. She was trying to say something, but the gag in her mouth made it impossible to understand. "What do you want?" I asked. "I want to show you something beautiful," Kane said, pulling out a long, curved knife. "I want to show you what happens when the hunter becomes the hunted. I want to show you what Amanda's going to sound like when she realizes nobody's coming to save her." He moved toward Amanda, and I knew I had to act. I fired twice, center mass, but Kane moved faster than should have been possible. The bullets sparked off the trees where he'd been standing, but he was already gone, vanished into the shadows like smoke. "You'll have to do better than that, Ranger Jones." His voice came from behind me, and I spun around, firing again. Nothing. The muzzle flash destroyed my night vision, leaving me blind in the darkness. "I spent 2 tours in Afghanistan, Ranger Jones. Special Forces. I know how to move in the dark, how to kill without being seen. Your little government training is nothing compared to what I learned in the mountains of Kandahar." I felt something whistle past my ear, a knife embedding itself in the tree beside me, then another and another. Kane was playing with me, showing me how helpless I was. "Do you know how many people I killed over there, Ranger Jones? 17 confirmed, but probably twice that many. And you know what I learned? I learned that I enjoyed it. I learned that some people are born to kill and some people are born to die. Guess which one you are?" I backed toward Amanda, trying to keep my gun ready while fumbling for my backup radio. If I could just get a signal out. "Your little girlfriend is quite the screamer, Ranger Jones. Would you like to hear?" The gag was suddenly gone from Amanda's mouth, and she gasped, "David, behind you." I turned just as Kane launched himself at me from the darkness. We went down hard, my gun flying out of my hand. Kane was stronger than he looked, and he fought with the efficiency of a trained killer. His knife came down toward my throat, and I barely managed to catch his wrist. "You know what the best part is, Ranger Jones?" Kane whispered, his face inches from mine. "I'm not just going to kill you, I'm going to make you watch while I work on Amanda. I'm going to make you listen to every scream, every plea for mercy. And then when you're broken and begging, I'm going to add you to my collection." I kneed him in the ribs and managed to roll away, but Kane was already on his feet, knife gleaming in the moonlight. He was smiling, enjoying himself. "Run, Ranger Jones. Make it interesting." I didn't run. Instead, I dove for my gun, but Kane was faster. His boot caught me in the ribs, and I felt something crack. The pain was excruciating, but I managed to keep moving, rolling behind a fallen log. "You can't hide forever, Ranger Jones. This is my forest. I know every tree, every rock, every shadow. You're just another lost hiker now." Kane was right. I was outgunned, outmaneuvered, and running out of options. But I had one advantage he didn't know about. I'd been working these woods for 12 years, and I knew something he didn't. We were less than half a mile from Bear Creek Falls, and this time of year, the rocks around the falls were slick with moss and spray. If I could get him there, I started moving, staying low, using the fallen logs and boulders for cover. Kane followed, taking his time, enjoying the hunt. Behind us, Amanda was sobbing, begging for help that wasn't coming. "You're only making it worse for her, Ranger Jones. Every minute you delay is another minute she suffers." I reached the edge of the clearing and plunged into the forest. Behind me, I could hear Kane laughing, crashing through the undergrowth like a wild animal. The sound of rushing water grew louder, Bear Creek Falls just ahead. I burst out of the tree line onto the rocky ledge above the falls. The water thundered down into the pool below, and the rocks were treacherous with spray and moss. Perfect. Kane emerged from the forest seconds later, knife raised, ready to finish what he'd started. But he didn't know the terrain like I did. He took one step onto the slick rocks and lost his footing. He went down hard, his knife clattering away into the darkness. I was on him before he could recover, my hands around his throat. "Where are the others?" I demanded. "How many more are there?" Kane tried to speak, but I was pressing too hard on his windpipe. I loosened my grip slightly. "Fuck you, Ranger Jones, you'll never find them all." "How many?" "Dozens, all over the park. I've been collecting for years." His eyes were wild, filled with a madness that ran deeper than simple evil. "They're all still there waiting for you to find them. Some of them are still alive, Ranger Jones. Can you hear them screaming?" I looked into his eyes and saw something that made my blood run cold. He wasn't lying. There were others, hidden throughout the park, and some of them might still be alive. "Where?" I demanded. Kane smiled, blood running from his mouth. "That's the beautiful part, Ranger Jones. You'll spend the rest of your life looking for them. Every shadow, every sound in the forest, every missing person report, you'll wonder if it's one of mine. You'll never sleep again." He lunged upward, trying to grab me, but the slick rocks betrayed him again. He slipped backward over the edge of the falls and disappeared into the churning water below. I lay there for a long moment, listening to the thunder of the water, trying to process what had just happened. Kane was dead, but his words echoed in my mind. How many others were out there? How many families were still wondering what happened to their loved ones? I made my way back to the clearing, my ribs screaming with every step. Amanda was still tied to the tree, but she was alive. I cut her free and called for backup on my emergency radio. The signal jammer had gone over the falls with Kane. "It's over," I told her, but even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. The investigation that followed was the largest in the park's history. We found 17 bodies scattered throughout the wilderness, some dating back 5 years. Sarah Chen, Jennifer Walsh, Marcus Thompson, they were all there, along with 14 others we'd never even known were missing. But Kane had been right about one thing. Some of the campsites he'd described were empty, showing signs of recent occupation. Either he'd been lying about how many victims he'd taken, or there were others still out there, waiting to be found. I retired from the Park Service 6 months later. The nightmares were too much. The constant wondering if every hiker who didn't check in was another victim. Amanda Richardson recovered physically, but she never went hiking again. She sends me Christmas cards, always with a note thanking me for saving her life. But I know the truth. I didn't save her life. I just postponed her death. Because somewhere in the darkness of the Great Smoky Mountains, Thomas Kane's work continues. Maybe it's copycat killers inspired by his legacy, or maybe it's something worse. Maybe he's still out there waiting for the next lone hiker to wander off the trail. 3 weeks ago, I got a call from my replacement at the park. Another missing person case, another hiker who'd disappeared without a trace. They found her backpack sitting upright against a tree, perfectly positioned, with a note inside written in familiar handwriting. "Hello, Ranger Jones. I've been waiting for you." The handwriting was different, but the message was the same. Someone had taken up Kane's work, and they knew I was out there, knew I was still looking. I'm not a ranger anymore, but I can't stop searching. Every missing person report, every unsolved disappearance, I have to check, have to make sure it's not connected to the Whispering Woods killer. Because Thomas Kane was right about one thing. I'll spend the rest of my life looking for his victims, listening for their screams in the darkness of the forest. And somewhere in those woods, something is waiting for me to find it. The whistling has started again. I hear it in my dreams, high and sweet, drifting through the trees like smoke. And sometimes when I'm alone in the dark, I swear I can hear Amanda Richardson screaming. But she's safe now, living in the city, far from the mountains. The screaming I hear belongs to someone else, someone who's still out there, still waiting for rescue that may never come. I've been a park ranger for 12 years, and I've learned one thing above all else. The mountains keep their secrets, and some of those secrets are better left buried. But I can't stop digging. I can't stop looking, because somewhere in the darkness they're still screaming, and I'm the only one who can hear them. So my name is Henry Wilson, and I am 41 years old. I've been a park ranger at Great Smoky Mountains National Park for 15 years. This happened during the fall of 2023, when the missing person case of Marcus Chen turned into something that still haunts me. The radio crackled to life at 4:17 p.m., just as the October sun was beginning its rapid descent behind the ridgeline. Unit 12, we have a missing person report. Male, 28, last seen on the Appalachian Trail near Klingman's Dome around noon. Name is Marcus Chen from Seattle. His girlfriend Rebecca waiting at the visitor center. I pressed the transmit button, my breath visible in the crisp autumn air. Copy that, dispatch. I'm 20 minutes out from Klingman's Dome. Any description? 5'10", black hair, wearing a red North Face jacket and gray hiking boots. Experienced hiker, but girlfriend says he's been acting strange lately. Nightmares, talking about voices in the woods. The last part made me pause. In 15 years, I'd worked dozens of missing person cases. Most were simple, hikers who'd wandered off trail, gotten turned around, or injured themselves. But the ones that mentioned behavioral changes beforehand, those were the cases that kept me awake at night. I radioed for backup and began the drive up the winding mountain road. The fall colors were at their peak, brilliant reds and golds that should have been beautiful. Instead, they looked like flames consuming the mountainside. Dead leaves swirled across my windshield in the wind, and I could smell the approaching cold front through my open window. By the time I reached the trailhead, dusk was settling into the valleys like spilled ink. I met Rebecca Chen in the parking lot, a petite woman with worry lines etched deep around her eyes. She'd been crying. "He's been having these dreams," she said, wrapping her arms around herself. "For 3 weeks now. Always the same thing. Voices calling his name from the woods. He said they sounded like children, but wrong somehow. He came here to face whatever was calling him." I felt the familiar chill that had nothing to do with the October air. Did he mention any specific location, any landmark he was drawn to? He kept talking about a place where the trail splits in 3 directions. Said he'd dreamed about it. She showed me a photo on her phone. Marcus grinning at the camera, but his eyes looked haunted even in the bright sunlight. He left his phone in the car, said he didn't want any distractions. I handed her my card and assured her we'd find him, though something in my gut was already screaming warnings. As she drove away, I shouldered my pack and clicked on my headlamp. The beam cut through the growing darkness, illuminating the familiar trail markers that led toward Klingman's Dome. The first hour of searching was routine. I followed the main trail, calling Marcus's name every few minutes and scanning for any sign of his red jacket. The autumn night was unnaturally quiet. No owl calls, no rustling of small animals in the underbrush. Even the wind seemed muted, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. At 6:30 p.m. I reached the first trail junction. This wasn't the three-way split Rebecca had mentioned, but something caught my eye. Fresh boot prints in the mud, size 10 or 11, leading off the main trail toward an old unmarked path that I'd never noticed before. I radioed my position and began following the prints. The path was barely visible, overgrown with dying ferns and littered with fallen branches. My headlamp beam danced across the trees, creating shifting shadows that seemed to move independently of the light. 20 minutes later, I found his jacket. The red North Face was hanging from a branch about 8 feet off the ground, far too high for someone to have simply dropped it. The fabric was torn, but not in a way that suggested an animal attack. The tears were deliberate, forming strange patterns that made my skin crawl. I photographed the jacket and called it in. Unit 12 to dispatch. Found the missing person's jacket on an unmarked trail about half a mile southeast of junction marker 7, requesting additional units and a K9 team. The radio crackled back with static, then silence. I tried again. Dispatch, this is Unit 12. Do you copy? Nothing but white noise. I checked my radio, full battery, correct frequency. My cell phone showed no signal, which wasn't unusual this deep in the park. But the radio silence was wrong. We had repeaters throughout this section of the mountain. I continued following the trail. Marcus's boot prints still visible in the soft earth. The path began to descend into a hollow I'd never explored before, despite 15 years of working these mountains. The trees grew thicker here, their branches forming a canopy so dense that my headlamp barely penetrated 10 feet ahead. That's when I started hearing the voices. At first I thought it was the wind through the trees, but as I stopped to listen, the sounds became more distinct. Children's voices, high and sweet, singing something that might have been a lullaby. The melody was beautiful and wrong at the same time, like a music box with a broken mechanism. "Marcus," I called out, my voice echoing strangely in the hollow. "Marcus Chen, if you can hear me, respond." The singing stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was absolute. No insects, no wind, no distant highway noise. Even my own breathing seemed muffled. I pressed forward, following the boot prints deeper into the hollow. The path began to curve, and I realized I was walking in a spiral, gradually descending toward some central point. My compass needle spun wildly, unable to find magnetic north. After what felt like hours but was probably only 30 minutes, I reached the bottom of the hollow. There, in a clearing surrounded by ancient oaks, I found the three-way trail split that Rebecca had described. But this wasn't on any park map I'd ever seen. More disturbing were the other items scattered around the clearing. A child's yellow rain boot, a woman's purse, the leather cracked and weathered, a man's watch, its face cracked and hands frozen at 3:33. These weren't recent, some looked decades old. In the center of the clearing stood a single dead tree, its bark stripped away to reveal pale, bone-white wood. And at its base, sitting with his back against the trunk, was Marcus Chen. He was alive but motionless, staring straight ahead with unblinking eyes. His lips moved constantly, but no sound came out. His hands were pressed flat against the earth on either side of him, fingers splayed wide. "Marcus!" I rushed toward him but stopped when I noticed his boot prints. They led to the tree, but they also led away from it, in 3 different directions, following each of the branching paths. I knelt beside him and checked his pulse. Strong and steady, but his skin was ice cold. His eyes didn't track my movement, didn't even seem to register my presence. Up close, I could see his lips forming words, over and over. "They're waiting. They're waiting. They're waiting." I tried my radio again. This time, instead of static, I heard something worse. The children's voices singing through the speaker. The same broken lullaby I'd heard in the woods. "Marcus, can you hear me?" I shook his shoulder gently. "I'm Sarah. I'm a park ranger. Your girlfriend, Rebecca, is worried about you." For a moment, his eyes focused on mine. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. They showed me the other ones. The ones who came before. They're all still here, Henry. They're all still waiting. Who's waiting, Marcus? Who showed you? The children. But they're not children anymore. They haven't been children for a very long time. His gaze drifted back to the dead tree. They chose this place. They chose me. And now they're going to choose you. The singing started again. But now it was coming from all around us. I spun my headlamp beam in a circle, trying to locate the source. The light caught movement in the trees, small figures darting between the trunks, always just at the edge of visibility. I needed to get Marcus out of there. I tried to lift him, but he was impossibly heavy, as if he'd become part of the earth itself. His fingers had pressed so deeply into the soil that I couldn't see them anymore. Marcus, we need to leave now. He laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Leave? You can't leave. None of us can leave. We're part of the waiting now. That's when I saw them clearly for the first time. They emerged from the tree line, 3 figures that might have been children once, but were something else now. Their faces were pale and elongated, with eyes that reflected my headlamp beam like an animal's. They wore the tattered remains of clothing from different eras. A Victorian dress, a 1950s Boy Scout uniform, a modern t-shirt and jeans. The one in the dress spoke first, her voice the crystalline tone of a music box ballerina. Hello, Henry. We've been waiting for you. I backed away, my hand moving instinctively to my service weapon. I'm a federal park ranger. You need to step back and identify yourselves. The Boy Scout laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a hurricane. Federal? We predate your federation by centuries. We predate your park by millennia. This was our place before your kind gave it a name. The third figure, the one in modern clothes, stepped closer. I could see now that it had once been a young girl, maybe 8 years old, but her smile was full of teeth that were too sharp, too many. Marcus told us about you, about how you save people, but you can't save anyone here, Henry. You can only join them. I drew my weapon, though I wasn't sure bullets would do any good against whatever these things were. I'm taking Marcus and leaving. Don't try to stop me. The Victorian girl tilted her head, the movement unnaturally fluid. But you misunderstand. Marcus doesn't want to leave. None of them do. They're happy here in the waiting. They're safe from the pain of the world above. She gestured to the dead tree, and I saw them then. Faces in the bark, dozens of them, all with the same peaceful expression as Marcus. Men, women, children, all different ages and from different time periods, all pressed into the white wood like photographs. Every missing person case you've worked, Henry. Every hiker who vanished without a trace. They're all here, waiting with us. And now Marcus has joined them. I looked back at Marcus. His body was sinking into the earth, already buried up to his elbows. The peaceful expression on his face was identical to those in the tree. They come to us, the Boy Scout said. The ones who hear our song. The ones who are tired of carrying their burdens. We take away their pain, their fear, their loneliness. We give them peace. That's not peace, I said, my voice shaking. That's death. The modern girl's smile widened impossibly. Is it? Look at them, Henry. Have you ever seen such contentment? Such serenity? They're free from the weight of existence. They're finally home. I had to make a decision. I could try to dig Marcus out, but he was already too deep, and something told me he wouldn't come willingly. Or I could run, try to escape this place and warn others. But as I backed toward the path I'd come from, I realized it was gone. The clearing was now surrounded by solid forest, no gaps between the trees. The 3 paths that led away from the dead tree were the only way out. Choose, the Victorian girl said. Left leads to the highway, but you'll never reach it. Right leads to the visitor center, but it's been abandoned for 50 years. Straight leads deeper into our domain where the others wait. I tried my radio one more time. Instead of the children singing, I heard my own voice coming through the speaker. They're all still here, Henry. They're all still waiting. The 3 figures began to circle me, their movements hypnotic. The singing started again, but now it was coming from the tree itself, from the faces pressed into the bark. Marcus's voice had joined the chorus. "You've spent so many years trying to save people," the Boy Scout said. "But you can't save them from what they truly want. You can't save them from peace." My vision began to blur. The weight of my pack felt enormous, the weight of my responsibilities crushing. How many missing person cases had I worked? How many families had I disappointed? How many times had I failed to bring someone home? "Let go, Henry," the modern girl whispered. "Let go of the burden. Let go of the pain. Join us in the waiting." I felt my knees buckle. The singing was so beautiful, so peaceful. It would be so easy to just sit down, to press my hands into the earth, to let the weight of the world drain away. But then I thought of Rebecca Chen, waiting for news of Marcus. I thought of all the other families who'd never gotten answers, who'd never known what happened to their loved ones, and I thought of the other rangers who would come looking for me. I forced myself to stand, to move. I chose the left path, the one that supposedly led to the highway. As I stumbled forward, the children's voices rose in anger behind me. "You can't leave," the Victorian girl shrieked. "No one leaves. You'll be back, Henry Wilson. You'll hear our song in your dreams and you'll come back to us." I ran through the forest, branches tearing at my clothes, my headlamp beam bouncing wildly. The path seemed to go on forever, winding through impossible geography. I passed the same landmarks over and over, a fallen log, a distinctive rock formation, a creek that shouldn't exist. Then suddenly, I burst out of the tree line onto the familiar trail near Klingman's Dome. My radio crackled to life with normal dispatch chatter. My cell phone showed full signal. I ran to my patrol vehicle and called in backup, search teams, everything we had. But when we returned to the area at dawn, we found nothing. No unmarked trail, no hollow, no three-way split. Just the normal forest, with Marcus Chen's red jacket hanging from a branch exactly where I'd left it. The official report stated that Marcus Chen had fallen from a cliff face about 2 miles from where his jacket was found. His body was recovered 3 days later, and the cause of death was ruled accidental. The case was closed. But I know the truth. I know what's waiting in that hollow that exists between the spaces on our maps. And I know that someday, when the burden becomes too heavy, when the failures pile up too high, I'll hear that singing again. I've had the dreams every night since then. The children's voices calling my name, promising peace, promising an end to the weight of responsibility. Sometimes I wake up with dirt under my fingernails, though I can't remember how it got there. Last week we had another missing person case, a young woman named Amanda Parker, last seen hiking alone near Klingman's Dome. Her boyfriend said she'd been having nightmares about voices in the woods. I volunteered to lead the search team, even though part of me knows what we'll find, or rather, what we won't find. Amanda is with them now, in the waiting. She's at peace, and every day the singing gets a little louder, a little more beautiful. Every day the burden gets a little heavier. Every day I understand a little more why Marcus chose to stay. The worst part is that I'm starting to envy him. I've been a park ranger for 15 years, and I've learned that some people don't want to be saved. Some people want to disappear. Some people want to stop carrying the weight of the world. But I also know that for every missing person who chooses to vanish, there are others who are. My name is Anthony Wilson, and I am 34 years old. I've been a park ranger at Glacier National Park for 8 years. This happened during the fall of 2023, when the missing person case of Rebecca Martinez turned into something that still haunts me. The call came in at 4:47 p.m. on October 15th, just as the sun was beginning its rapid descent behind the jagged peaks of the Continental Divide. I was finishing my daily patrol report when dispatch crackled through my radio with the familiar weight of urgency that every ranger knows too well. "Ranger Wilson, we have a code yellow. Missing person, last seen on the Highline Trail approximately 6 hours ago." I grabbed my jacket and emergency pack, already knowing this would be a long night. October in Glacier meant early darkness, temperatures dropping fast, and the kind of bitter wind that could kill an unprepared hiker in hours. The missing person was Rebecca Martinez, a 28-year-old graphic designer from Denver who'd been backpacking alone. Never a good sign this late in the season. Her last known location was the Highline Trail, a narrow path that hugs the Continental Divide with 1,000-foot drops on one side and sheer rock faces on the other. Beautiful in daylight, deadly in darkness. I'd worked 17 missing person cases in my 8 years here, and 13 of them had ended badly. The mountains don't forgive mistakes. I met up with my partner, Ranger Sarah Johnson, at the Logan Pass Visitor Center. Sarah was newer to Glacier, only 3 years in, but she had good instincts and never panicked under pressure. Her search dog, Bear, a German Shepherd mix, sat alertly in the back of her patrol vehicle, sensing the tension. "What do we know?" I asked, checking my radio and GPS unit. Rebecca Martinez, solo hiker, experienced according to her permit application. She was supposed to check in with her sister by satellite phone at 3 p.m. Never made the call. Her car is still in the parking lot. Gear missing suggests she planned an overnight. Sarah's breath came out in visible puffs in the cold air. "Temperature's dropping fast. We've got maybe an hour of decent light left." I nodded, running through the protocols in my head. Search pattern, radio check-ins every 15 minutes, emergency beacon activated, medical kit, cold weather gear, standard procedure for a code yellow. But something felt different about this one. Maybe it was the way the wind seemed to carry voices that weren't there, or how the shadows between the trees looked darker than they should. 8 years in these mountains teaches you to trust your instincts, even when they don't make logical sense. We started up the Highline Trail at 5:15 p.m., headlamps cutting through the gathering dusk. The trail was well maintained but narrow, with a cable handrail on the cliffside and rock wall on the other. Perfect conditions for an accident, especially if someone was hiking alone and lost their footing. Bear immediately picked up a scent and began tracking northeast, his nose low to the ground. The first strange thing happened 20 minutes in. Bear stopped abruptly and refused to continue forward, whining and backing away from what appeared to be an empty section of trail. I'd seen search dogs react to bear scent or dangerous terrain before, but this was different. His hackles were raised and he was trembling. Not from cold, but from something I'd never seen in him before. Fear. "Easy, Bear," Sarah said, trying to coax him forward. "What's wrong, boy?" I knelt down and examined the area with my flashlight. The trail looked normal. Packed earth, a few scattered leaves, some boot prints that could have been from any number of hikers. But there was something else. A smell, faint but unmistakable. Like sulfur mixed with rotting meat, so subtle I almost missed it. "Do you smell that?" I asked Sarah. She sniffed the air. "Smell what?" I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The forest had gone completely silent. No wind through the trees, no small animals rustling in the underbrush, no bird calls. Just an oppressive quiet that seemed to press against my eardrums. "Let's keep moving," I said. But Bear still wouldn't go forward. We had to carry him past that section of trail, and even then he kept looking back over his shoulder, whimpering. At 6:30 p.m., we found Rebecca's backpack. It was sitting in the middle of the trail, perfectly upright, as if someone had carefully placed it there. Not thrown or dropped, not torn or damaged by a fall. Just sitting there, waiting. The pack contained all her gear: sleeping bag, food, water, first aid kit, satellite phone. Everything a smart hiker would need to survive a night in the wilderness. Why would she leave her pack? Sarah wondered aloud, examining the contents. Her phone's here, fully charged. Water, food, emergency shelter. She wouldn't abandon this unless she was running from something, I finished. That's when we heard the screaming. It came from somewhere deeper in the forest, off the main trail. A woman's voice, high and desperate, calling for help. The sound echoed off the rock faces, making it impossible to pinpoint the exact location. But it was definitely human, and definitely in distress. "Rebecca," I shouted back. "Rebecca Martinez." The screaming stopped abruptly. Then, after a moment of silence that felt like hours, we heard it again. But this time, something was wrong with it. The pitch was too high, lasting too long without breath. No human throat could make that sound. Bear began howling. "We need to call for backup," Sarah said, reaching for her radio. But when she pressed the transmit button, all we got was static. No response from dispatch, no connection to the outside world. "My radio's dead too," I said, checking my equipment. The GPS unit was showing our location as coordinates that didn't exist, latitude and longitude numbers that would place us somewhere in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. The screaming came again, closer this time. And now I could hear something else underneath it. A low rumbling sound like a diesel engine, but organic somehow. Alive. "We need to find higher ground," I said. "Get to a place where we can signal for help." But as we climbed higher on the trail, the forest around us began to change. The trees looked different, twisted, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers. The rock faces seemed to shift and move in the periphery of our vision, and the smell, that sulfur rot stench, was getting stronger. At 7:45 p.m. we found Rebecca. She was standing in a small clearing about 50 yards off the main trail, her back to us. She was wearing the same hiking clothes described in her missing person report, but something about her posture was wrong. Too straight, too still, like a mannequin. "Rebecca," I called out. "Rebecca Martinez?" She turned around. Her face was Rebecca's face, but wrong. The features were all there. Brown eyes, dark hair, the small scar on her chin from her permit photo. But her expression was empty, hollow, like looking at a mask. Her eyes were completely black, not just the pupils but the entire eye, like looking into deep water at night. "Hello, Anthony," she said, and her voice was wrong too. Too deep, with an undertone that seemed to come from somewhere else. "I've been waiting for you." I'd never told her my name. Her permit had my name as the responding ranger, but there was no way she could have known that. "Rebecca, are you hurt?" Sarah asked, stepping forward. "We're here to help you." The thing that looked like Rebecca smiled, and her teeth were too sharp. Too many of them. "Oh, I'm not Rebecca anymore." Rebecca was insufficient. "But don't worry, I'll take good care of her body." That's when I realized what we were dealing with. Not a missing person case. Not a wilderness accident. Something else. Something that belonged in campfire stories and old legends, not in a ranger's incident report. "Sarah, back away," I said quietly. "Back away now." But the demon wearing Rebecca's face laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Too late for that, Anthony. I've been watching you for so long. 8 years of missing persons, 8 years of bodies that were never quite right when you found them. Did you never wonder why?" I thought about the 13 cases that had ended badly, bodies found in impossible locations, expressions of terror frozen on their faces, families who said their loved ones seemed different in the days before they disappeared. I'd attributed it to trauma, to the psychological effects of being lost in the wilderness, but now, "You're responsible for all of them," I said. "Not all. Some were simply accidents, the mountains claiming their due. But the others..." The demon's smile widened. "The others were so much more fun. I do enjoy wearing new faces." Bear was barking frantically now, backing away from the clearing. Sarah had her radio out, desperately trying to raise dispatch, but I could tell from her expression that she was getting nothing but static. "What do you want?" I asked. "Want?" The demon tilted Rebecca's head at an unnatural angle. "I want to play, Anthony. I want to hunt. I want to feel the terror of your prey as it runs through my forest. And when I'm done playing, I want to wear your face back to town, meet your friends, live your life. At least until I get bored." It started toward us, moving with an odd, gliding gait that didn't quite match human locomotion. Sarah raised her pepper spray, but I knew it wouldn't work. This wasn't something you could fight with ranger training and standard equipment. "Run," I told Sarah. "Get back to the trail and run." We ran. The demon followed, crashing through the underbrush behind us with inhuman speed. I could hear it laughing, the sound echoing off the rock faces like a pack of hyenas. Bear was ahead of us, leading the way back to the main trail, but even he seemed to be struggling with the terrain that had somehow become unfamiliar. The trail wasn't where it should have been. We'd come from the northeast, but now every direction looked the same. Dense forest, rocky outcroppings, and shadows that moved independently of our flashlight beams. The demon had somehow changed the landscape around us, turned familiar terrain into a maze. "This way," Sarah gasped, pointing toward what looked like a break in the trees. But when we reached it, we found ourselves back in the same clearing where we'd found Rebecca. Or the thing wearing her face. It was waiting for us, sitting on a fallen log like it had all the time in the world. Rebecca's body looked more wrong now, joints bent at impossible angles, skin pale and waxy, eyes completely black. "Lost?" it asked pleasantly. "That's unfortunate. I was hoping for more of a chase." I'd faced dangerous wildlife before, dealt with armed poachers and unstable visitors, but nothing in my training had prepared me for this. The demon radiated a wrongness that made my skin crawl and my vision blur around the edges. Just looking at it felt like standing too close to a fire. "There's nowhere to run, Anthony," it said, standing up. "This is my territory now. Has been for years. Every missing person, every unexplained disappearance, every body found in impossible locations, all mine." "The other rangers," I said. "They'll come looking for us." "Will they? Check your GPS again." I looked down at the device. The coordinates were still impossible, but now they were changing, scrolling through random numbers like the system was glitching. Our location, according to the GPS, was moving in real time, even though we were standing still. "Technology doesn't work the same way in my domain," the demon explained. "Radio signals get lost, GPS coordinates lie, emergency beacons fail. Very convenient for someone in my line of work." That's when I remembered the emergency flare gun in my pack. Standard equipment for search and rescue operations, designed to signal aircraft or distant teams. I'd never used it in 8 years of service, but desperate times called for desperate measures. I pulled out the flare gun and fired it straight up into the air. The projectile burst into brilliant red light about 100 feet above us, casting everything in a hellish glow. For a moment, the demon's stolen face showed surprise. Then it started laughing again. "Clever, Anthony. But who's going to see it? Who's going to come to your rescue in my forest?" The flare burned out, leaving us in darkness that seemed deeper than before. But something had changed. The wrongness in the air felt different, less oppressive. The demon was still there, still wearing Rebecca's face, but it looked less solid somehow. "Sarah," I whispered. The light hurt it, or weakened it. I had 2 more flares in my pack. Standard emergency protocol called for spacing them out, using them to mark your location over time. But standard protocol didn't account for supernatural predators. The demon heard me whispering and snarled, dropping any pretense of humanity. Rebecca's face twisted into something bestial, teeth extending into fangs, fingers growing into claws. It leaped toward us with inhuman speed. I fired the second flare directly at it. The projectile struck the demon center mass and burst into brilliant white light. The creature shrieked, not with Rebecca's voice, but with something that sounded like metal being torn apart. The light seemed to burn it, leaving patches of darkness where Rebecca's skin had been. It retreated, hissing and spitting, but I could tell the damage wasn't permanent. The dark patches were already filling in, Rebecca's face reforming. "That won't work forever," it said, but its voice was less confident now. "I'm older than your light, older than your weapons, older than your pathetic species." "Maybe," I said, raising the third and final flare. "But you're not older than the mountains, and you're not stronger than the wilderness that made you." I'd spent 8 years in these mountains, learning their moods and dangers. I knew how the wind patterns worked, how sound carried between the peaks, how the terrain could be used against an enemy. The demon might have supernatural powers, but it was still bound by the physical laws of this place. I fired the last flare, not at the demon but at the forest canopy above it. The burning magnesium ignited the dry autumn leaves, creating a wall of fire between us and the creature. The demon screamed as the flames spread, not from the fire itself but from the light it created. "Now!" I shouted to Sarah. While it's distracted, we ran through the forest, Bear leading the way. The demon's shrieks echoed behind us, but they were getting fainter. The fire had spread quickly in the dry conditions, creating a barrier of light that the creature couldn't cross. We ran for what felt like hours, stumbling through underbrush and rocky terrain. My GPS was still showing impossible coordinates, but I could feel the wrongness in the air beginning to lift. The forest was starting to look familiar again, and I could hear the distant sound of rushing water that meant we were approaching the main trail. At 11:30 p.m., we stumbled out of the tree line and onto the Highline Trail. My radio crackled to life immediately. "Ranger Wilson, Ranger Johnson, please respond. We've been trying to reach you for 3 hours. I'd never been so happy to hear dispatch in my life." "This is Wilson. We're on the Highline Trail, approximately 2 miles from Logan Pass. We need immediate backup and a medical team." "Copy that. Are you injured? Did you find the missing person?" I looked back at the forest where we'd encountered the demon. The fire was still burning, creating a glow against the night sky. But there was no sign of the creature, no trace of Rebecca Martinez. "Negative on the missing person," I said. "We need to talk to the chief. There's been a development." The backup team found us 20 minutes later. We were both suffering from mild hypothermia and exhaustion, but physically we were fine. Psychologically was another matter. I tried to explain what had happened, but how do you write a report about a demon? How do you document supernatural encounters in official Park Service records? The chief listened to our story with the patience of someone who'd heard every possible explanation for missing persons over the years. "You encountered something in the forest," he said finally. "Something that made you fear for your safety. The stress of the situation, combined with the difficult terrain and weather conditions, created a traumatic experience that your mind is still processing." "Sir, with respect, we both saw the same thing. Sarah's dog reacted to it. The radio and GPS malfunctions are not uncommon in that area during certain weather conditions. The missing person case remains open, but we'll suspend the search until daylight. You both need medical evaluation and some time to process what happened." The official report listed Rebecca Martinez as a missing person, presumed dead due to exposure and wilderness hazards. The search continued for 2 weeks, but her body was never found. The fire I'd started with the flare was ruled accidental, caused by dry conditions and emergency procedures. But I knew the truth. The demon was still out there, somewhere in the vast wilderness of Glacier National Park, waiting for the next solo hiker, the next missing person case, the next opportunity to wear a human face and walk among us. 3 weeks later, I put in for a transfer to a different park. Sarah did the same. We never talked about what happened in the forest, but I could see it in her eyes, the knowledge that some missing persons cases don't have natural explanations. Bear never fully recovered from the encounter. He retired from search and rescue work, spending his remaining years as a therapy dog for trauma victims. Sometimes, on quiet nights, he would stare at the forest and whine, as if he could still smell that sulfur rot stench on the wind. I still work as a park ranger, but now I'm stationed at Yellowstone, where the dangers are more predictable. Geothermal features, wildlife encounters, avalanche zones, risks I understand and can prepare for. But every time I get a call about a missing person, every time I have to organize a search and rescue operation, I remember the demon wearing Rebecca Martinez's face. The worst part isn't the memory of that creature. It's not the knowledge that there are things in the wilderness that don't belong in any ranger manual. The worst part is the doubt. How many of those 13 cases that ended badly were really accidents? How many missing persons in our national parks are actually victims of something far worse than exposure or wildlife attacks? How many demons are out there, wearing human faces, walking among us until they get bored and return to their hunting grounds? I don't know the answers to those questions, but I know this. The wilderness is vast, and it keeps its secrets well. And sometimes when the wind is just right and the shadows are deep enough, I can still hear that inhuman laughter echoing through the trees. Rebecca Martinez was never found. Her case remains open, one of thousands of missing persons in our national parks. But I know she's still out there somewhere in the darkness between the trees, waiting for the next ranger foolish enough to go looking for her. And I know that someday, someone will find her. Or rather, something wearing her face will find them. The mountains don't forgive mistakes, but some mistakes hunt you back.